There was a light chill in the morning air, the kind that doesn't sting, but doesn't comfort either. It just makes its presence known. Allison Parker had the window of her SUV rolled down. She wasn't thinking about anything in particular, just watching. Her 12-year-old daughter, Zoe, sat in the passenger seat beside her. No longer her usual bubbly self, but quiet, withdrawn. Her back was straight, but her shoulders were slumped, like something invisible was weighing her down. Zoe didn't say a word. She just grabbed her bag and stepped out of the car. "Have a good day, sweetheart," Allison said, like she did every morning. But Zoe didn't turn around. It was as if she hadn't heard her mother at all. Allison should have driven away, gone on with her day like always. But something felt off. She pulled into a parking spot without really deciding to. Her feet moved on their own, following her daughter from a distance. Zoe walked toward the school building, and Allison watched every step. Then it happened. One moment that stopped her heart cold. There was a piece of paper taped to Zoe's back with white duct tape. On it, in thick black letters, were the words, "Sad freak with no dad." Allison froze. It felt like someone had punched her square in the chest. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. There were people around, teachers, parents, kids, but no one said a word. A few smirked. Some purposely looked the other way. Others just walked past, like this was nothing new. Zoe kept walking, completely unaware. Head down, eyes on the ground, shoulders caved in, like she didn't feel it, like she was used to it. Allison felt something inside her crack open and collapse. Her little girl was completely alone in this world, and not a single person had the decency to tell her what was on her back. She could have run, could have yanked the paper off and screamed at every adult in sight. She could have shaken the walls of that campus, but she didn't. She just stood there, hand covering her mouth, eyes wide with a storm of fear, anger, shame, and helplessness. All at once, the bell rang. Kids began filing into the building. Zoe headed toward the cafeteria. And Allison? She stayed frozen, like time had come to a halt. Then a voice rose up from inside her, small but steady. No more silence. Enough is enough. She turned, walked back to her car, and dialed the school office. Her voice was calm but firm. "I need to speak with the principal. Now." Then she walked inside, her footsteps no longer hesitant, but certain, like a mother on a mission. A few minutes later, Zoe was called out of class. She walked into the office and sat across from her mother. Her eyes stayed on the floor. Her face looked drained, the kind of exhaustion no child should ever carry. Allison leaned in, trying to catch her daughter's gaze, but Zoe looked like a closed book. "Zoe?" Allison's voice trembled. "How long has this been going on?" Zoe didn't answer. For a moment, the room was silent. Then her lips moved, barely above a whisper. "Claire, and some boys with her." Allison felt like her insides had been clawed open. Claire, the school's golden girl. The one always front and center at PTA meetings, flashing her perfect smile in every yearbook photo. She was the one humiliating Zoe? And the other kids? They were just watching, laughing, while her daughter endured it all. Alone? The drive home was silent. Sunlight poured through the windows, but it felt harsh now, like it cut instead of warmed. Allison gripped the steering wheel tighter. She wanted to say something, anything, but every word felt wrong. Zoe stared out the window as if every tree and every passing house could take her to another world. One where no one was watching her, no one laughing, no one judging. The moment they got home, Allison walked straight to her bedroom. She opened an old drawer, one she hadn't touched in years. Inside was a folded envelope, faded, yellowing at the edges. On the front it said, "Daniel Parker, Fort Bragg." Her heart started pounding. Fast and heavy, that name. the one she used to love more than anything, and then came to hate just as deeply. Daniel Parker, Zoe's father, the man who wasn't there for her, the man who wasn't there for their daughter. That night, while Zoe stayed in her room, Allison picked up a pen and began writing the kind of letter she never thought she'd ever write. Daniel, your daughter is afraid of herself now. She barely speaks. She doesn't laugh. She hides, even from me. And I can't do this alone anymore. Every word was soaked in tears. But that letter wasn't just for Daniel. It was a cry from a mother who was unraveling, a silent scream from a little girl who had learned how to suffer without saying a word. In that one moment, Allison knew no more. Something had to change. The morning light poured through the window, but Allison's face still carried the weight of a sleepless night. Her head throbbed, her chest felt tight, like writing that letter should have lifted something off her shoulders. But instead, it had made everything heavier. Zoe hadn't come out of her room yet. Allison made coffee, but it tasted flat, like everything inside her had gone numb. When Zoe finally came downstairs, there was a strange stiffness in her steps. She looked like a shadow of the girl she used to be. The one who used to hum for no reason, read comic books out loud, hide superhero sketches under her pillow at night. That girl was gone, and Allison didn't know how to find her again. The silence at the breakfast table was heavier than anything else in the room. Even the smell of toast felt anxious. Allison looked up and saw Zoe staring at her plate, but there was no hunger in her eyes. "Do you want to go to school today?" Allison asked gently. Zoe shrugged. Not a yes, not a no. "Zoe," Allison's voice was soft, like tracing a finger across glass. "Why don't you talk to me anymore? You used to tell me everything. Now, nothing." Zoe didn't respond. She was fiddling with a rubber band, the way she always did when she was anxious. Allison felt her heart teeter on the edge. She looked down, then quietly said, "I know you might be mad at me. Maybe that's why you don't want to tell me things. But please, I need to know. How long has this been going on?" There was a pause. Then Zoe's voice came, faint and cracked. "Since 6th grade." "Claire?" Allison asked. Zoe nodded slightly. "And a few boys. Josh. Nate." Her voice faltered again. "They rip up my drawings, laugh at my braids, say, 'No, Dad, that's why she's weird.'" Allison's fingers gripped the coffee mug tighter. This was a kind of pain she hadn't seen, a wall her daughter had built around herself, and as a mother, she hadn't even realized it was there. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Allison whispered, tears pushing against her voice. "Because—" Zoe closed her mouth, then opened it again after a moment. "Because I wanted it to stop on its own. I thought, if I just stopped being noticeable, maybe they'd stop." Allison felt her chest squeeze like someone had clenched a fist around her heart. Her daughter wasn't just hurt, she was disappearing from herself. She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "You do know. You're my greatest strength, right?" Zoe didn't say anything, but her eyelashes fluttered, like she was trying not to cry, trying to hold on. That night, Allison mailed the letter she had written the night before, to Daniel. Her hand trembled as she slid it into the envelope. But it wasn't just paper and ink, it was a cry. A door she wasn't sure would ever open again, but one she had to knock on. The next morning, Allison's phone buzzed. 3 words lit up the screen. "Tell me when." Her heart skipped a beat. Years of silence, distance, and blame, cut through by a single, direct line. So few words. But they hit deep. She knew something was about to change. The sound of the letter dropping into the mailbox was small, but in that sound, Allison felt something massive, like a part of her had been sealed inside. She stood there for a moment, her hand resting on the metal lid, her palm damp despite the crisp morning air. This wasn't just a message. It was a mother's broken plea, a wife's unfinished story, and a daughter's silent suffering, documented on paper. Allison had spent nights awake before sending that letter. While writing it, her heart had swirled with emotions: anger, guilt, fear, a flicker of hope, and above all, shame. She had repeated the same words again and again as she wrote, "Your daughter is afraid of herself, and I don't know how to fix it." She knew the letter wasn't a solution. It was a knock on a closed door, a path that might never reopen. She didn't know what kind of man Daniel had become, if he'd changed, if he was even ready to face Zoe, or if he'd just disappear again, like before. But she still hoped, not because she trusted him, but because Zoe deserved not to feel so alone anymore. That day passed. Allison kept checking her phone, her breath catching with every notification, but there was no reply. Until the next morning, she was making coffee, the soft morning light filtering through the kitchen window, when her phone vibrated again. She picked it up almost absent-mindedly, and there it was, glowing on the screen. "Tell me when." She stared at it for a long moment. Even after reading it, she wasn't sure she believed it. Daniel had responded. Her heart raced. A small tremble ran through her fingers. She sat down, gripping the phone like it might vanish. 1,000 questions swirled in her head. Would he do the right thing? Would he show up for Zoe without excuses? Would he say he was sorry? But those 3 words, they weren't excuses. They weren't defensive. They sounded like a man who had finally stopped running. A father who, at the very least, was ready to listen. She didn't hesitate. She typed her reply. Friday, 12:30, Eastside Middle School cafeteria. As soon as she hit send, a wave of something stirred in her chest. She took a deep breath, like a dam cracking, letting years of stillness finally start to move. That afternoon, Zoe was quieter than usual on the ride home. Allison didn't ask anything. She just reached over, ran her hand gently through Zoe's hair, and said, "Maybe a surprise is waiting for you tomorrow." Zoe looked up, wary, unsure, but said nothing. Allison didn't press. She just gave her a small, quiet smile. That evening, she made Zoe's favorite pasta. She knew Zoe wouldn't talk, but when she saw her daughter eat, just a little, with the tiniest flicker of appetite returning, it gave Allison a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. That night, after Zoe fell asleep, Allison pulled out an old photo album. Inside was a picture from when Zoe was 3. Daniel's finger was gently touching Zoe's shoulder. His smile was faint, uncertain, but there had been trust in his eyes, trust that Zoe never got the chance to see. Allison placed the photo on the table and whispered, "Maybe now. She will." She never expected one letter to shift so much, but now something in the air had changed, like a long-sealed window had finally been cracked open. The dust was beginning to lift, and something inside, something long asleep, was finally waking up. The Friday afternoon sun was bright, but the air carried a strange chill, like time itself had slowed down, waiting for something to happen. Allison stood outside the school building, a brown paper bag in her hand holding Zoe's lunch, and a growing restlessness inside her that tightened with every passing second. Her fingers kept smoothing the edges of the bag over and over again, like she was trying to straighten out a fear she couldn't name. She glanced at the time, 12:27. Then she looked at the school building, its brick walls silent as always. But today, even the walls felt different, like they too were holding their breath. Daniel hadn't responded to her last message, just one word. Okay. But would he really show up? Would he be able to face Zoe? Would he be able to face himself? Allison walked in through the main doors, each step weighted with emotion. The receptionist gave her a small, familiar smile and nodded. Lunchroom's that way, she said, pointing. Allison nodded back, steadying her breath. The cafeteria was buzzing. Laughter, clattering trays, the scrape of metal chairs and spoons. But Allison's eyes found only one thing: Zoe sitting alone in the corner, just like always, her tray barely touched, her fingers tracing faint lines along the edge of a napkin. She wasn't talking. No one was sitting near her. Allison took a single step forward, and that's when the door opened. The noise didn't stop. It softened. Daniel Parker walked in, dressed in full U.S. Army uniform, his posture straight, his stride firm, his face unreadable, stars on his shoulders, medals across his chest, and in his eyes, something that couldn't be described: exhaustion, regret, and a sliver of hope. Allison saw him and forgot how to breathe. Daniel didn't scan the room. His eyes went straight to Zoe. No performance, no hesitation. Just one clear path, right through the sea of kids, like time was splitting for him. Zoe looked up. She saw him. And for a moment, everything stopped. Her eyes widened. Her hands froze. The napkin fell still. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her entire body felt caught between disbelief and something else. Something stirring just beneath the surface. Daniel stood right in front of her. His voice was steady, not loud, not shaking, just real. I'm her father, and I have something to say. Silence. Total, immediate silence. Kids, teachers, kitchen staff. Everyone heard it. Zoe still didn't say anything, but her breathing grew shallow, quicker. From across the room, Allison watched. Zoe's hands were still on the table, but they had stopped trembling. Daniel turned his gaze to the kids nearby: Claire, Nate, Josh, the ones who always laughed at Zoe. He didn't glare, just looked, and one by one they lowered their eyes. Ashamed. If my daughter seems strange to you, maybe take a look at yourselves first. She doesn't talk much. That doesn't mean she's weak. It means she listens. She sees, and she feels deeper than most of you will ever understand. If any of you think that makes her less, you're wrong. A breath seemed to pause across the entire cafeteria. Then Daniel reached down, picked up the apple from Zoe's tray, placed it right back in front of her, gently, like nothing had ever been broken. Then he sat down across from her, not with questions, not with explanations, just presence. Zoe's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. Her expression wasn't fear, it was awe, like something she never allowed herself to hope for had suddenly walked into the room, and she hadn't had time to believe it yet. Allison watched from a distance, her eyes full. For the first time in years, she saw Zoe safe, not hiding, not folding in on herself, just seeing her father right there for her. The noise slowly returned to the cafeteria, but something had shifted. Claire's laughter had vanished. Josh was staring into his lunch tray. Nate had moved to another seat. And Zoe? She was still sitting in the same spot, but now her back was straight. Her hands weren't trembling. Her fingers weren't sketching anymore. She was just looking at her father, like she had finally found someone who didn't need words to understand her. Allison felt it, that moment, like a door opening, like time had come full circle and landed right back at the spot where everything had once fallen apart. She gripped the lunch bag tightly and slowly closed her eyes. That afternoon, for the first time in a long time, Zoe wasn't alone. The school grounds had emptied out. Most kids were already in their cars or swallowed up by the pickup line. But today, Zoe and Allison didn't head straight home. Zoe sat in the back seat, gazing out at the window. But her face wasn't the same as it usually was. There was a stillness to it, a strange, peaceful kind of surprise. Driving, Allison kept glancing at her daughter in the rearview mirror. Zoe was quiet, but thinking. Allison wanted to ask, but she waited, hoping Zoe might speak first. Do you want to ask me something? Allison said gently. Zoe didn't nod or shake her head, but after a moment she whispered, Why did he come today? Because I sent him a letter, Allison replied. Why did you send it? That question came from a deep place, like a wound being touched. Allison pulled over. She turned around slowly and said, Because I thought, maybe it's time you knew how much you matter, and maybe now he understands what he lost. Zoe was quiet. Then her voice broke slightly, the kind of pain you carry for years. Did he ever want me? Or did you make him come? Allison's eyes welled up. I never made him come, Zoe. I was broken too. I didn't know what the right thing to tell you was. But today, I didn't make him come. I gave him a chance, and he took it. Because maybe he's finally tired of running. When they got home, Zoe didn't ask any more questions. But that evening, when Daniel showed up again, Zoe answered the door herself. She looked him straight in the eye and asked, Where were you all these years? Daniel was quiet, then finally said, I was running from myself. I didn't think I could be a good father. I thought if I stayed away, I'd cause less pain. And now? Zoe's voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. Now I don't want to run anymore, Daniel said. I'm here, if you'll let me be. Zoe looked down, then opened the door all the way. At the dinner table that night, the three of them sat together for the first time. There was no pretending, no forced conversation, just a quiet that felt safer than it used to. Zoe kept looking at Daniel, at the shape of his hands, the rhythm of his voice, the tiny ways he moved, like she was learning him again, or maybe for the very first time. Softly, Daniel asked, Do you still draw comics? Zoe shook her head. No, I stopped. Why? He asked. Because I thought no one was looking. Zoe said it simply, but Allison's heart cracked all over again. Later that evening, Zoe went to her room and came back with an old sketchbook. She placed it on the table and opened it. The last few pages were just unfinished lines, like a story that got scared of being told. But the very last page had a drawing. A girl, no sword, no shield, just an open palm, and eyes that told the truth. Beneath it, the caption read, She has no shield. Only her truth. Daniel stared at it for a long time. Then he looked at Zoe and asked, Can I keep this? Zoe paused, then nodded. Yeah, but don't hide it. Never. That night, Zoe quietly reached for Daniel's hand. No dramatic hug, no big gesture, just a signal, a small bridge, the first brick in something new. Allison saw it, and for the first time in years, she let herself cry. Not from pain, but from relief, from forgiveness, from a breath she'd been holding for far too long. That Monday morning felt different. The sunlight was the same. The air drifting through the window was just as soft, but Allison could feel it. Something had shifted. As she made breakfast, she saw Zoe walk downstairs. No prompting. Wearing her old Captain Stride hoodie she hadn't touched in months. She spread jam on her toast quietly, but her fingers didn't flinch anymore. Daniel sat across from her. No awkwardness, like he'd always been there. He asked her lightheartedly, You nervous about that assembly speech? Zoe looked up and smiled, small but real. I'm scared, but the good kind. The kind that comes right before you speak. In that moment, Allison realized something. Her daughter was back, but not the same girl she had lost. Stronger, wiser, whole. The school auditorium was packed. Students, parents, teachers, even a few local reporters. One by one, kids took the stage. Some talked about cyberbullying, others spoke about friendship. Then came the announcement. Next speaker, Zoe Parker. There were whispers. Zoe? The quiet girl? The girl who always sat alone? But today, She walked up to the stage, holding her mother's letter. She didn't read from it, just held it in her hand, like a shield made of truth. She took a breath and said, "My name is Zoe Parker. Over the past few years, people have said a lot about me, that I'm weird, that I don't have a dad, and for a long time, I believed them. I believed I was exactly what they wrote on my back, a sad freak." The words echoed through the room. Some kids looked down. Claire sat frozen, picking at the seam of her chair. But then my mom wrote a letter, and it wasn't just a letter, it was a door that reminded me I'm not alone, I'm not weird, and being quiet isn't weakness. Being alone doesn't mean you've lost. She leaned forward to the mic. I'm not here today just to tell my story. I'm here so that maybe someone else who's quiet knows they're not alone either. There was a beat of silence, and then applause. First soft, then louder, until it filled the entire hall. In the back, Daniel and Allison stood, eyes wet, hearts full. After the assembly, several students came up to Zoe. Some shook her hand, some just smiled. She didn't say much, but her silence now meant something new, not fear, but strength. That evening, Daniel gave Zoe a brand new sketchbook, shiny, clean pages waiting to be filled. She opened it that night, and on the very first page, she drew a new hero. No shield, but eyes full of truth. She wrote underneath, "Commander Truth, she doesn't fight to be seen. She fights because she already knows who she is." Allison saw the sketch. She looked at Daniel, didn't say a word, just gave him a long, tired smile, the kind that lets you lay down years of weight, if only for a moment. That night, at the dinner table, Zoe cracked a joke, one that made Daniel laugh so hard he spilled his water. Allison laughed too. And just like that, a new chapter began in their old broken story. One with no silence, no blame, no loneliness. Zoe was no longer just the girl who sat alone. She was her voice, and her voice now echoed from the stage, not from her back. The end.